If you're an athlete, you know the greatest motivator of all is the fear of letting your teammates down. After all, a team is only as good as its weakest link. So you owe it to those wearing the same jersey as you to be your best every time you step on the field. That's why there's no vape in team. When you vape, you can expose your lungs to toxic chemicals that can damage your lungs. If you're a step behind, the team's a step behind. Brought to you by The Real Cost and the FDA.
It's a common sense recap of the big stories. It's Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
Joining us now is Andy McCarthy, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. Andy, everybody's waiting to see, first off, what's going to happen, of course, with the Supreme Court. They could come back tomorrow. They could come back next week on the potential immunity issue, which could have a big bearing on some of these upcoming trials. But you wrote a really powerful column about how maybe these trials may happen. Some of the other ones, people are like, whoa, after everything that happened in New York. Talk about what may be ahead in D.C. and Florida for President Trump.
Well, there's a lot happening, Rita. And I think that it's going to happen in a kind of a rat-tat-tat way for former President Trump, which is going to make it hard for him to sort of stay on message as far as the campaign is concerned. Obviously, we are in the run-up to this sentencing on July 11th, which I think is, for people who think that the public has already sort of internalized what it thinks of the Manhattan case. I wish I thought that was true, but my experience, sentencing is a very important part of the criminal process, and people may think of the case a lot differently depending on what kind of sentence Merchan imposes. In the meantime, I think the consensus opinion is that the Supreme Court is not going to grant former President Trump sweeping immunity. It'd probably be some narrow immunity, and maybe Jack Smith will lose some of his case, but he's not going to lose all of it. And the thing that's going to happen right after the Supreme Court does whatever it does on immunity and also on obstruction, which is very important to that case as well. But then that case is going back to the district court in Washington, and Judge Chutkan, if Jack Smith wants to try to push very hard to get what's left of the case to trial, there's every possibility that Judge Chutkan will accommodate him and try to get the case to trial prior to Election Day. And then finally, in the meantime, over the next, I think, Rita, it's like Friday, Monday, Tuesday. I think I have that right. But there's pretty important proceedings in the Florida case during those days when they're going to argue a lot of important pretrial motions, including a constitutional attack that's been joined by former Attorneys General Meese and Mukasey on whether constitutionally Jack Smith is a proper prosecutor in this case. So there's a lot going on.
I heard that Tanya Chutkan, the one in the D.C. case, as you brought up, Andy McCarthy, that there are reports that she sort of cleared her slate for the next few months in case she does get the go-ahead and can kind of go forward with this. Doesn't this seem like your thoughts on election interference in the sense that, look, where the debate is happening next week, then you got the Republican National Convention. There's going to be another debate. But, boy, we're like in the thick of it with the campaign season. At some point, don't they say, wait a minute, obviously even before seemed in the thick of it, this really seems like it's in the thick of it.
I think most people will feel that way, Rita, but we have to figure the alternative universe that they inhabit, right? So Jack Smith has been pushing this line, which I think Judge Chutkan has bought wholesale, that the public has an interest in a speedy trial of Donald Trump, which is really a perversion of the Constitution, which gives the defendant the right to a speedy trial. What the public wants is a fair trial, not a speedy trial. That's our interest. But the Democrats have been pushing this narrative that it's of immense importance, not just to Democrats, but to the public at large, that the Trump case on January 6th go forward prior to Election Day, which is kind of, it's almost hilarious because Smith also says that the so-called 60-day rule, where the Justice Department tells us that it usually won't take public action against a candidate who's a defendant within 60 days of election, they've said that doesn't apply to Trump, which implies that
that's amazing.
Yeah, that implies that you could start the trial in October and try it right through election.
Hold on, I got some breaking news.
Yeah.
DA
Breaking news, WABC.
DA Bragg drops all trespassing charges against all Columbia protesters.
Oh, of course, because their last name isn't Trump. That's why. I mean, come on. It drops all. These are all the protesters, of course, with the anti-Semitic protests at the schools. Your reaction, Andy, real quick.
It's no surprise, right? This is Bragg got elected. What everybody should remember here, as much as it nauseates me, he was elected by the people of Manhattan to do exactly the kind of stuff that he's doing. He promised, I'll use the powers of my office against our political enemies, meaning Trump. But in the meantime, I'm going to have a no prosecution approach, which is what they wanted in Manhattan. So I guess you get what you vote for.
Wow. Governor Patterson.
Andy, I, of course, as you know, I'm a Democrat, and I honestly believe that if they start one more trial against the former president in this period between now and November, it will be election interference. It will interfere with Biden winning, because I think that will be a tipping point. I guarantee it. I guarantee you that.
Governor, what do you think of it's hard to look at like a Fox poll as an outlier, but I think some of this is starting to resonate, and I don't say that with any joy, because I don't like the lawfare at all. But suddenly we have a poll from Fox a couple of days ago that has Biden ahead for the first time on the Fox poll, I think, for weeks.
Yeah, no, actually months, since October, Andy. Since October.
And I know, some of the interpretation of that is that the economy is doing a little better, or people are feeling a bit better about it. But it seems obvious to me that the lawfare is taking its toll. And, all of the people who looked at this and said, oh, the public is so angry about this lawfare, it's going to redound to Trump's benefit, I think you're whistling in the graveyard. Most people are not as transfixed by politics as we are. They dip in casually, and what they hear is, Trump was on trial. Trump got convicted. Trump's going to be sentenced. Trump's on trial again. That can't be good. And even if it's not catastrophic, a point or two or three is the difference between winning an election and losing a close election.
Yeah, it's stunning.
Well, I'll give you this, Andy. I was surprised at the poll. I even think to some degree it's an outlier. But what I will say is that if I was advising the Biden people, if you play with fire long enough, it'll burn you. And I think that is something they need to think about.
Ed Cox. And also we have Ed Cox here. Ed, your thoughts?
Don't you think that we sort of are more focused on these trials, and the people, the voters, are basically looking at what's happened to their paychecks? And maybe this Fox poll reflects that inflation's going down a little bit, and that gives them some hope?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in my experience, things don't happen for one reason. I think that's a factor. But I also think you can't think that people who are not obsessed by politics, but who, when they hear about politics, are hearing that, this or that terrible thing happened to Trump in the criminal justice system. I just don't think we can dismiss that as something that's out of people's consideration. It's going to be a very tight election, and small things might make a big difference.
You might well be right.
Yeah, great point. And Gov, your thought was really powerful, what you said about the trial, if it happens. Another one this summer, too. Wow. Andy, thank you very much. Great to have you here.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Joe Piscopo. When you're looking for concrete materials for your next construction project, call Diamondback Ready Mix on Staten Island. This family-owned and operated business is the go-to supplier for concrete materials in New York, New Jersey, and the surrounding tri-state areas. My friends and experts from Diamondback Ready Mix are experts and fully licensed and insured in New York and in New Jersey to deliver ready-mix concrete to your job site. Give them a call today for more information at 718-650-5649, 718-650-5649.